Hey, everybody. Yes, welcome back to the Paid Search Podcast. My name is Jason Rothman. As always, I'm joined by my great co-host, the great Chris Schaefer. Chris, did you do CrossFit today?
Yeah, I did. And I
You did?
actually had a joke. I was gonna put a bandage on my head and pretend like I'd physically hurt myself and broke my back, just because I know you're always worried about me. But
I am. I'm worried about that spine.
I know.
But all
I
your
know.
joints are good, knees.
I'm good,
Yeah.
healthy, strong, tired, exhausted, and hungry. But it's not about me. I'm here to talk about Google AdWords, and we have a very different. So if you guys have been listening, we've been talking a lot about, every week we've been doing the same series about how to build your AdWords campaign, and we've taken that step by step. This is this happy Thanksgiving, by the way, right? This is coming out on Thanksgiving. And basically what we're doing this week is taking a break from that. So don't worry, guys. If you want to find out the next steps in building your AdWords campaign, that's coming up. We're still going to continue that series, but we're taking a break from that for Thanksgiving and doing something a little special. Jason, you want to tell them about it?
Yeah, don't worry, everybody. We didn't have second thoughts about giving away all our value and everything we know for free.
Right.
We're going to get back to that next week. But today, we are joined by Jacob Baadsgaard, the founder and CEO of Disruptive Advertising. Jacob, thank you for joining us. How are you doing today?
I am doing fantastic. Thanks for having me on the show, guys.
Great. It's honestly, it's great to have you here. In my mind, Disruptive is just seriously one of the top pay-per-click digital marketing agencies on the planet. And it's a real pleasure to have you here. So we're going to ask you some AdWords performance technical questions, and then we're just going to get your thoughts on some industry questions. But I want to just start out by asking you tell us about your background, founding Disruptive, and then where you guys are today.
Yeah, you bet. I'm from Utah. I'm actually married. I have 3 daughters that are 9, 7, and 3. And when I'm not working or with my family, I love to fish. A lot of people don't know that about me. That's my favorite thing to do. Professionally, my background, actually, I worked at Omniture, which was a web analytics platform prior to it being acquired by Adobe. It's kind of like an expensive version of Google Analytics for those listeners that aren't familiar with that. And worked with a lot of Fortune 100 companies implementing analytics and making sure that their marketing teams had the information that they needed to make good decisions. And so that was my background. It was actually during that time period where I got introduced to PPC advertising.
Okay.
It was the easiest to track. It was the easiest, we could tie it through to revenue, start making some meaningful decisions. And really what kind of triggered revenue tracking for PPC for e-commerce has been around for a really long time now. Where it's always struggled and been behind the curve is tracking through to revenue in a lead gen program. And so I did a lot of integrations, just learned how to do that very efficiently and effectively. And man, when people are optimizing on a cost per lead and you jump in and say, hey, yeah, you thought you wanted a bunch of cheap leads, but none of these are closing. These ones that cost you 3 times as much are closing at 10 times the rate, and they're totally worth your dollars. That's where I started to see the opportunity in the market, and that's what kind of was my foray into learning the skills on the PPC side and ultimately building a business around helping companies do the same thing.
And can you give some people some idea about Disruptive? And on your site, it talks about you started years ago as a 1 or 2 person team. And then can you just give our audience an idea of the scale here? Because you guys, I think you just celebrated a big milestone I saw on your Instagram page. And can you just give a scale of how big the business has gotten?
Yeah, so we celebrated our 4th anniversary in September of this year, just a couple months ago. 4 years ago, it was just me as an independent. And now we've got about 85 people in the organization.
Wow.
And in September, we celebrated hitting 10 million for the first time in a year. We hit that in September. And, what's crazy is that things are just accelerating at this point. And so between September to October and then October to November, hit some numbers that were the initial goals of the company to get to that point. And so things are really taking off.
Well, congratulations. And I follow you guys' blog. And just to give everyone another little bit of insight on how big you guys are, my girlfriend, we live together. We've been together for 5 years. She's a PR marketing person. That's she's in that field, but she's not like an AdWords person. And she doesn't ask me very much about my job, so I kind of have to brag on here to Chris. But I told her you were coming on, and she goes, and again, never asked me about AdWords, not in the AdWords industry. I go, Jacob's coming on, the CEO of Disruptive. And she goes, oh, I know Disruptive. I follow their blog. So you're reaching a lot of people there, and congratulations on how big your agency has gotten. So we're going to kick off the AdWords questions here. And I saw another interview with you, and you just have this rule of 5 to 1 that I just love. The number one question I get from advertisers and clients is, how do I know if AdWords is working? How do I know if I'm making money? I'm getting phone calls. I'm getting lead forms. How do I know if I'm making money? So can you kind of talk about this 5 to 1 rule, and also like why it's not 1 to 1 or 2 to 1?
Yeah, you bet. There's 2 parts to that question that are probably worth us addressing. Number one, you can't use that rule of thumb if you're not tracking revenue to begin with. Okay. And so it could be as simple, if it's e-commerce tracking, you should be able to get that set up pretty easily to track through to revenue. In a lead gen model, it can be as simple as just doing a VLOOKUP in Excel with the leads that came in from AdWords and those that actually turned into sales, and just matching the phone numbers or the email addresses or something. I mean, you can really do it quite manually that way if you need to. Or, a more sophisticated way would be to integrate your CRM with AdWords so that you can see what's going on as far as what's closing and what's not. Now, assuming that we have revenue tracking correctly back to AdWords, there's a rule of thumb that I've just found it holds pretty true in a lot of situations. If you spend $1 in marketing and you produce $3 in revenue, that's about a break-even proposition. And when you think about it, that means you're spending 33% of all of your revenue on marketing. Right. Very few companies spend that much on marketing, right? And it makes sense that, 33%, that's probably going to be hard for us to be profitable at that rate. At a 1 to 4 is where we find that it's profitable, but like, hey, this is good, but not like awesome, and I don't really know if I want to invest that much in here. And the 1 to 5 seems to be where it's more scalable. And
yeah. Go ahead. Sorry. Yeah. I was saying 5 to 1. It's like, that's when wow, things are working, and I'm going to pull in. I'm trying to grow the budget and pull in from other sources.
Absolutely. And what we found is that it does vary by industry. And the other thing to keep in mind is when I say a 1 to 5 ratio, I'm referring to customer lifetime value. So Gotcha. If someone buys a $50 product from you, but people on average buy 2 or 3 times from you, then that 1 to 5 ratio is not just on one transaction, it's on the total transactions that a customer is buying from you. So, that's the other thing that's important to keep in mind.
Well, I love that because Chris and we both do a lot of lead generation with AdWords. And I work with a lot of moving companies, and they're just not sophisticated in terms of like, this customer searched this word, this move brought in exactly this much money. And they may not know the exact number of revenue to cost, but I love that they can have a goal of 5 to 1 and know that most likely they're doing very, very well at that number. The other thing I love about that rule is it helps you work backwards when AdWords maybe isn't working for you. I thought this was just genius when I heard it. Why don't you talk about that?
Well, when people come to me and say, how much am I going to have to spend to be successful on AdWords? That's the wrong question to be asking, right? What I like to do is ultimately, using this rule of thumb, is to just simply say, all right, what's a client worth to you? Total revenue that we're going to get from them. And then I start working my way backwards, and it really feeds me a lot of information that's going to indicate whether AdWords is even going to work or not. Right. So they say, okay, a customer to me, let's say I'm a HVAC plumbing company. And a customer to me is, we typically are going to get 3 to 4 service calls from anyone that does business with us once. We're going to get 3 to 4. Each visit, is going to be on average $150. So we're going to say a new client to us is worth anywhere in the $400 to $600 range, right? Okay. Cool. That's my lifetime value of what a customer is worth to me. Hopefully we've got good numbers to back that up, but sometimes you've got to extrapolate whatever information you've got a little bit as well.
Right.
Once we've got that locked down, then I just say, okay, how many new customers are you hoping to get? well, I'd love to get 100 new customers a month. We've got the trucks, we've got the bandwidth. We'd love 100 new customers a month. I said, okay. Well, rule of thumb would tell me, let's say 500 for easy math. If you should be willing to pay about $100 to get a new customer, right? That 1 to 5 ratio. Is it, do you feel like if you could go to the store today and buy customers off the shelf, would you buy them for $100?
Right.
And if the answer is yes, okay, cool. Now we know what we're working with. Then I say, okay, if that's the cost per customer that I'm looking for, how much is it going to cost me to get a lead, right? Because not every lead is going to turn into a sale.
Right.
So then I go in and look in the keyword planner. I go and look at other platforms as well to say, okay, how big is the audience in this area? What's a click going to cost me? How many clicks do I think I can get from these keywords based on the volume? And then I use some rules of thumb on what conversion rate I might expect. At what rate are those clicks going to turn into leads? And then you say, okay, cool. We're going to get these clicks are expensive in this industry. They're $10 a click or whatever that is.
Right.
And in that particular industry, we happen to be able to get close to about a 33% conversion rate. So that means, okay, cool. If we're spending $10 a click, 1 out of every 3 clicks is turning into a lead. Okay, cool. We're getting a $30 per lead. Is it reasonable for us to be converting 1 in 3 or 1 out of 4 into a customer when they call into and if they say yes, okay, cool. This seems like it's going to be a good fit for us, right?
Right.
That's what we kind of call our viability or marketing math 101 to determine which marketing platforms, A, are even going to get in front of the right audience, and B, is it financially viable?
Yeah, I love that, because then if you determine that your cost per new customer is going to say be $100, and they told you they want 100 customers, you just do 100 times 100, and then there's your budget. And to me, that's so much smarter, having the end goal in mind, than just thinking, oh, I'm a small business, I've got an extra $3,000 a month I don't know what to do with, let me throw it at Google.
Well, and then it also sets an expectation, right? So now that we say, okay, we're getting customers for $100 or whatever, what the example is, $3,000 a month budget. By the time you pay an agency fee, if you're working with someone or an internal person to handle that, plus the $3,000 in spend, you could say, okay, you know what? We probably could expect in like the 25 to 35 customers a month.
Right.
And that way we're not setting an expectation of, hey, we're hoping to get 100, but that's just not realistic given this.
Right. Yeah, I love that rule.
All right. So Jacob, my question is this, 1 to 5, I think that's great. I really respect that thinking. And I'd love to hear, other AdWords agencies and companies talk about, real ROI and stuff. And I know, and you've looked at a lot of campaigns and you've seen a lot of clients bring their old campaigns in and stuff. And what would you really say is the reason why so many people are doing it wrong? I mean, there has to be some like big thing that it's almost always this case. Why are most typical business owners, managers, not hitting this 5-to-1 rule?
Well, there's a lot of reasons that go behind that. Let me give you at least a couple of the major ones that I see on a regular basis, and we can go from there. We've actually developed a technology that early on, when it was just myself or when the team was still small, and even 18 months ago, people would come to us, we'd do an audit in their campaigns, see what's going on, and we'd really put almost 40 man hours into analysis, putting together a good review of what we found, and then present that to the client. Well, we've developed a technology that we just push a button and it does it for us now, right? It takes about 20 seconds and it does way more than we ever did manually, and it spits it out instantly. That tool is now run on over 4,000 AdWords accounts, and the average amount that we see being wasted is 76%. That is not driving a single conversion, and we're typically looking at a 6-month window there. So we've given it some time to let things convert as well. That's what we're seeing is, all right, hey, instantly, if you could put that 76% to good use, your multiple or that ratio just got a lot better, right? You might be closer to that 1 to 5. Now, there's a couple of things that we've identified that are primarily contributing to the poor performance. And one of them is just a simple structure of the campaign. When, too many people get like super excited and just bid on way too many keywords and spread their budgets super thin. One of my sayings is, if you see limited by budget in your account, that to me is kind of like the AdWords F word, if you would. And here's why. The campaign is no respecter of keywords at the budget level. When that campaign runs out of budget, the good and the bad keywords turn off at the same time. And so really simplify the structure and let the budget flow through those that are performing the best. And hey, guess what? You just made your life easier because your account just got a lot more simple. And now let's focus on getting closer to 100% impression share on the keywords that are working for us best.
We're laughing and smiling over here because it sounds. Have you been listening to our podcast? Because that's exactly what we were saying. I think it was just last week we spent like what 15, 20, 30 minutes talking about this idea that complexity is like a plague of the AdWords industry, where and we have I think we're going to bring that up later, is talking about Skaggs and stuff, and that's really interesting. I'll have to say that's really refreshing to hear, because it often seems that people are, when they are paid to build something, they think that complexity is a way of showing their superiority in their AdWords knowledge, and I don't think that that's necessarily true. So
yeah, not in all situations. There are situations where being a little more complex can be beneficial, but that's the outlier more than it is the norm, for sure.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, no. One thing I really like about your guys' content and just some interviews I've seen, as a lot of people in our world, they talk about quality scores and dynamic keyword insertion, and things get very technical and very granular very fast. And it seems like people forget about the other person on the other side of the ad a lot of times. And so I've heard you talk about, when you guys create ad copy, you actually come up with an idea in your head, like a buyer persona of the person you're talking to. And ever since I heard you talk about that, it's really helped me come up with like better ad copy. So can you kind of talk about your guys' ad copy process in terms of like actually thinking about the person on the other side of the ad?
You bet. And this ties into one of the other big reasons why we see a lot of wasted ad budget as well. It's the common theme that we see is generic keywords with generic ads pointing to a general page on the website, right? And the days are past where the traffic is cheap enough that you might get enough revenue to justify that. You've got to be specific. What I would say is, if you've logged into AdWords without a purpose, you've already lost. Okay. Very little time actually needs to be spent in AdWords. Most time actually should be spent outside of AdWords, understanding what needs to be happening in order for this company to be successful. Step number one is just understanding who we're advertising to, right? Are you going to tell me that an ad copy for a 50-year-old woman and an 18-year-old man should be the same? You're going to resonate in different ways. And so what I've found is, take a step back. Don't jump into AdWords all hot and heavy and ready to just start cranking, because that tends to take you down a rabbit hole, overcomplicate things, and at the end of the day, it's not even as much fun that way, right? I love to take a step back, and most businesses, depending on their size, will appreciate this statement to an extent or another. But one of the biggest things that I've learned in growing and scaling a business is there is absolutely such a thing as bad revenue, right? We've all worked with that client that it's like, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
Right? It's not worth it. I would have to charge such a high asshole fee to make this worth my time that, like, why am I doing this? And it's the 80-20 rule. 80% of your revenue is coming from your 20 best clients anyway, right? Or products, clients, whatever you want, whatever, depending on your industry. 80% of your headaches are coming from 20% of your clients as well. Right. There is absolutely such a thing as bad revenue. And saying no to bad revenue can accelerate growth faster than anything else. And tying this back to buyer personas, this is the exact conversation that I'm having with the client. What are the clients you like working with the most, and why? Right. And why do they like working with you, right? And then all of a sudden we start to define the good revenue that they're looking to get with the people they like working with, that pay them the most, that they add the most value to, that makes it actually an enjoyable job or project or whatever that is. And we say, cool, let's come up with a strategy to target these people. Because what I've found from an ad copy perspective is I say, okay, here's who we're targeting. Here's the top 3 problems that they're having. And here is at least 2 or 3 ways that we solve for each of those problems. Well, I just came up with my ad copy testing for 18 months, guys, just by going through that process before I jump into AdWords. Then I go in there, boom, 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 pop out my keywords, put up some good ad copy, queue up some other ones, and maybe pause them with the other factors that I want to test in there as far as the pain points are concerned. And I'm ready to go, right?
Right.
And one of the things that we've found is that everyone says, well, what about everyone else that might buy from us, right? We want to make sure that our messaging doesn't exclude anybody. And if you ever have those thoughts, change that mindset. Because what you'll find in AdWords and most platforms, what's an average click-through rate, guys? It's depending on the industry, anywhere from 1 to a couple %, right? You're going to get some higher or lower than that as well. Well, if 100 people are looking and 1 to 5 of them are only clicking on your ad anyway, and you really narrow down the message to try and appeal to a different type of audience, man, I see click-through rates go up sometimes by being more specific with my ad copy.
Right.
Because look, you had 95 other people that your generic copy wasn't appealing to, and you might even lose some of the clicks you would have got otherwise. But I oftentimes see click-through rates go up when we get more specific, right?
Yeah.
It's interesting. Most people just get too worried about, I don't want to lose anybody, so I'm going to try and cater a message to everyone. Don't do that. You'll shoot yourself in the foot.
That's terrific insight, because I've done that with the keywords I target. Like I'll go out of my way to maybe exclude the word cheap if I'm doing a plumbing campaign, because we found that people who search cheap plumbers, they're going to be those customers that are really, really going to try to drill you down on costs, and you're not going to be happy working with them. Never thought about it doing it on the ad copy side as well, and trying to maybe not attract those kinds of customers who would search cheap movers. So if they're searching or plumbers, if they're searching plumbers near me and they don't search cheap, you can still try to stay out of their way by having ad copy that doesn't talk to them. So that's great insight there.
Absolutely. That's spot on, man.
All right, so Jacob, I have a question for you here, and this goes back to originally what you were talking about. I'd like to know how you feel about single keyword ad groups. The term that people like to use is Skaggs. Jason and I have done entire episodes where we have basically done a mock debate where we talk about pro and con of Skaggs. And it's been a topic that we bring up a lot, especially with our recent series on how to build an AdWords campaign. What are your thoughts on Skaggs? I mean, you go to Google's official website on how to start your campaign, how to do a good best practices campaign. They don't mention it, but then you might call the helpline, or you look on agency blogs and all these other pros, and they talk about Skaggs as the way to do it. I mean, I would imagine you are not necessarily for Skaggs in that the approach that you described before was a much more simple approach.
Well, and here's the thing. If I was a politician, I'd be accused of being a flip-flopper. If you went and Googled my name and Skaggs next to it, you'd see some great articles that I've written about that in the past. I still believe in Skaggs, but I define Skaggs differently now. Simple keyword ad groups, right? And so here's the thing. There are strategies that we're finding work so much more effectively now, especially depending on the industry. And here's the thing. We want to keep things simple, and we want to focus on what works. My current opinion on the matter, and this could change, right? Because it's not a static target that we're dealing with on these ad platforms, is if I wouldn't change the ad copy, it's going in the ad group. The keyword's going in the ad group.
There we go, yeah.
If I would change the ad copy, I'm creating a new ad group. That's it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that's the conclusion that Jason and I had come to last week, is that, when it comes down to it, the only reason you have new ad groups, it's not about the bids. and it's not about having everything separate. It's about the ad copy. So yeah.
Well,
cool.
one thing I would throw in there is if there are budget constraints that would cause that ad group to deplete a budget prematurely in a day, and some of those keywords are performing better than others, I may separate it out into a different campaign. That would be the one other situation where I would say, hey, that still makes sense, because I want if the ad copy would be the same, it's going in the same ad group, but I'm making sure that my account is structured in a way that I'm not throttling anything that I shouldn't be. If I've got a really clear winner, and for whatever reason, these keywords are similar, but this one performs way better than the other, I just don't want to throttle that either. So that might be another reason why I may not put it in the same ad group. But generally speaking, my ad groups are still tight enough that that's not an issue that often.
Right. And then you're talking about campaign to campaign, not necessarily, which is a whole nother conversation, right? I mean, when you deal about budgets and campaigns, there are separate decisions that you need to make there. So yeah, that's great. I appreciate that.
Perfect.
So Jacob, you talked earlier, you've got 85 people that are part of Disruptive, and I imagine a good number of those work just on like AdWords campaigns, and they're in-house AdWords experts for you guys. So I wanted to get your insight as someone who's taken a lot of employees who maybe were not AdWords experts to begin with, and help them become AdWords experts. Everybody who listens to our show, they're listening because they want to get better at AdWords. So after seeing that many people become experts, what would you recommend to listeners out there in terms of how they can get better at AdWords and get to that expert level? Are books, tools? Is it just an experience thing? What are your thoughts on like how you go from knowing about AdWords to really being great at it?
Yeah. Well, if you had asked me this earlier in my career, I always did not appreciate when people said, oh, well, we value, how much value was weighted on experience, right? Because I've always been hungry and scrappy and don't hold me back, right? Because of my quote unquote lack of experience. Well, now that I have a lot of experience, there's definitely something to be said for that, right?
Right.
When you accidentally overspend on an account, when you let that misspelling flow through that the client sees.
Right.
Yeah, right.
We've all been there, right? So like, if we need to cry it out or hug it out, like, hit me up on LinkedIn and we can commiserate together. But, those are some valuable lessons that no training program can give you, right? It burns it into your soul.
Right.
But what are the things that we can do to accelerate that process, right? What we've found is that there are two very key components to being successful in AdWords. One of them is just the marketing strategy. And then the second is the ability to execute in the account, right? The ability to execute in the account is actually the easiest thing to train, right? Here's how you change bids. Here's how you do settings. Here's how you structure things. It's fairly black and white, and we've actually developed a pretty good internal training program that works people right through that. What we've found to be effective at getting people up to speed faster is by letting someone senior focus on the strategy and letting the junior person execute until they've executed long enough that the experience and the technical skills start to mesh together. And
Right.
So that's what we've done. The other thing that we've done is we've actually just started automating a lot of the things that we do as well. Long term, AdWords itself, Google itself will automate most of what AdWords experts do right now, right? The days of advanced analysis and pivot tables in Excel and all of these things that we do and we think is so cool, like that's all very easily automated.
Right.
And where the value of an AdWords expert truly lies is in developing awesome strategy, right? And that's something that's really hard to automate. Creativity in messaging, a really solid strategy that is financially sound. That to me is where people are going to win. And that's where I would focus my time in my development because, yeah, these settings, the interface itself, all of these technical skills that we learn could all be obsolete in 1 or 2 years from now. And that's why I would place more emphasis on the strategy side.
Yeah, that's great insight. And that kind of gets us into a couple industry questions we have for you. And it sounds like you've been thinking about this a lot. Artificial intelligence, machine learning. That's getting thrown around so much these days. And a question we get all the time is like, hey guys, we love your show. Is this going to be a job we can even do in 5 years? And people ask us, are you worried that like the machines are coming and going to make you obsolete? What is your take on that? And like, do you view the whole AI machine learning thing as a threat to your business or as an opportunity?
Yeah, well, for me and mine, I see it as an opportunity. And so we're already investing in developing machine learning into our own technology. And the reality is we're the independent third party that's looking to help our clients be successful, relatively platform agnostic, right? Google just happens to be the behemoth that, you know, it's a logical choice for a lot of the dollars to flow through.
Right.
The value that we can bring is, I think we approach things differently than Google does. We're building automation around things in ways that I don't think Google is planning to do. And so I love leveraging those components. And in a perfect world, we've already automated the audit and monitoring of our accounts. We've already automated, we've got a really slick dashboard that we can customize to any platform, any reports that we need through a SaaS platform that works fantastic. Even some of the strategy components that we've been talking about, we've been able to automate some of that as well. And what that does is it allows my people here that love AdWords, that love marketing, to spend their time doing what they love to do. I think that the machine learning, the automation, the artificial intelligence, I think removes the manual components that people don't really like doing anyway, right? And if that's what you're basing your value on as a marketer or an AdWords expert, yeah, you're going to become obsolete eventually. If you're basing your value based on the strategy and your ability to make an impact in the business, because tell me how Google automates a sales team that doesn't know how to close the leads that are coming in from AdWords.
Yeah.
Okay. Tell me how they automate that, right? It's not going to happen. There's so many things that they need a strategic thinker that if that's where you double down, that's where you go and learn and really build yourself that way, you're fine. I mean, there's never going to be a shortage. There's always going to be a shortage on those types of people.
So it's like the PPC manager. We should almost look at ourselves as like a business strategist that uses these platforms to help the companies we work with get leads and grow.
Absolutely. And if you just do optimizations and end at we got you a lead, good luck. A, you're going to churn through a lot of clients. And B, you're never really going to understand how to add real value to people's lives, right? The most satisfying thing about being a marketer is the ability to actually influence real meaningful change in a company. All of a sudden you dial in that campaign that's driving sales at a rate that's affordable and they scale that up and you just created 10 jobs for a company. Man, that's something that we can put our stamp on and say, I was a part of that, right? And there's so many of those components that it's exciting, it's fun. And the only things that are being automated are the things really you don't want to be doing in 10 years from now anyway.
Right. Well, thank you for that answer. And that talking about Google getting into new platforms and automation, we've saved this question for last. Our listeners know that this Google Home Services pay per lead thing they're doing is giving Chris some heartache, and we want to ask you about it. So, Chris, why don't you catch Jacob up to speed on where you're at with this, and we'll get his insight into it.
Yeah. So, Jacob, I've probably burned some bridges, you know, because I know that Mountain View listens in sometimes. I've talked about it in the past with frustration. The official name is now Local Services, Google Local Services, and basically for anybody who doesn't understand, it's a new pay-per-lead system that is currently in beta, and it's assigned to specific industries that have in the past had issues with real quality service providers in those areas. You know, locksmiths, there was a lot of, in the past, there was a lot of scams, plumbers, they have an ability to drive traffic to their site, but they don't have a way to, Google doesn't have a way to ensure that the quality of the provider is good. So in comes Local Services. I'll tell you, my experience has been not very favorable. I have not enjoyed the way that it's been rolled out, and it's been difficult as an AdWords manager to provide my clients with the proper service when the tools and the ability to get into the system and provide that is not there. What do you think about Google entering in to what a lot of companies have been trying to do? Angie's List and other companies have been trying to do. Do you think this is the future? Do you think this is just something that's being tested, could go by the wayside? Do you think this could blow up and somehow go beyond just the home services scope?
I think, I don't know for sure is the honest answer. It seems to me like it could absolutely continue to progress in the home services industry for the reasons that you've just described. The reality of the matter is that the market will dictate what it likes and what it doesn't like. And so if Google is good at providing leads at a rate that makes sense for those businesses, and they're able to provide some quality control over vetting those companies before they'll allow them to buy leads, it could be a good thing, right? I don't love it because it potentially removes opportunities for us as a company to service those clients. So part of me feels a little defensive or worried from that standpoint. But the reality is, the ones that I'm excited about are figuring out the new challenges, the dynamic way of doing it, the creative way of doing things. And so, yeah, I don't think that I ever see this happening in a lot of industries that we service. I don't know how you ever do that for B2B, SaaS or services, which is something that, one of the areas that we have a lot of our business. E-commerce, I don't think you can really do it there, right? But you look at some of these home services ones, yeah, I could see that kind of progressing over time. And I think ultimately the market will dictate to Google, hey, we get better quality and price efficiency from buying your leads or not, and that will be the dictator on the direction that things move there.
Yeah. In my experience in using the system, it seems to be much like AdWords Express, which is it works. There's many companies that use it and spend a lot of money in it, and in the end, it's I'm torn because, like you said, I'm a bit apprehensive because I don't have a place in that, because it's not a keyword micromanagement type of thing where you can adjust things to meet your strategy. It's very much a, what would you like? Put the money, put the quarter into the machine, and it delivers whatever the system provides. And that's scary as a professional, but also frustrating because I know, like you said, some industries are just not really prepared for something like that.
Yeah.
Well, Jacob, that's it. We could keep going for hours and hours, but we
could.
We know your time is valuable. So we don't have many guests on this show because when we want to have someone on, we want a bunch of value for our audience. And it was awesome, truly. They definitely got that today. And Chris and I started this podcast to talk with other people in the industry and learn ourselves. And I learned a lot here today. So thank you very much for coming on. And for all the businesses and listeners out there, how can they get in touch with Disruptive and get started with you guys if they need help with AdWords or Facebook?
You bet. A couple of things that we always like to do just to make sure that we're a good fit for you or that you're a good fit for us is we actually go through the process that we've described. We want to make sure we understand who your buyer personas are first, what makes sense financially for you as a business. For those of you that are already running AdWords, we actually run a free audit, right? We can push a button, we can export the audit and give it to you, whether you work with us or not. We'd love to give you that information and show you areas that you can improve. And then ultimately, if you decide, hey, we'd love to engage your services, the best way is just to reach out to us. What I would recommend is going to disruptiveadvertising.com/audit, right? And fill it out there. That's a page that we've got set up for that. We'll give you that free audit. Take a look and see if we really can add value. If not, we'll be the first ones to tell you. If we can, we'll tell you exactly what that looks like. And, see if you're wasting 76% of your budget or not.
Right.
Our tool can tell you that in 20 seconds. So we'd love to help out.
Okay, awesome. Well, we will We will link to the audit page, and we will let everyone know about that. Thanks for coming on, and everyone, next week we'll be back to the yeses, the CrossFit talk, giving away everything we know for free. And Jacob, thank you very much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.